everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the Riverside Podcast. We took a week off, but we're back today, and we're going to be meeting with some of our Gen Zers in our church as we finish up this Generation series. Although I don't think this is going to be the last week of this Generations podcast. I think we're going to do another week or two in which we bring together multiple generations together to have some cross-generational talks. So maybe you'll see our Gen Zers again in a week or two. But let me just give you a little bit of summation. Maybe you haven't watched any of our podcasts yet. We've been talking about the different generations from the silent generation to today. We will look first at the silent generation, those born between 1925 and 1945. Then we talked about our baby boomers, those born between 1946 and 1965. Then in our third episode, we talked to some Gen Xers, those who were born between 1966 and 1980. And then in the last time we were together, we talked to our millennials, those who were born between 1981 and 1996. Today, we're going to be talking to some of our Gen Z generation. Those who are Gen Zers were those who were born between 1997 and somewhere between 2012 and 2015. I'm going to give you just a few kind of general identifiers of our Gen Z generation, and then I'm going to turn it over to these folks and let them share some of their ideas with you. But just a few general thoughts about who Gen Zers are. Gen Zers, number one, are called the digital generation because Gen Zers were born and have never known a time without some kind of digital media, whether it was cell phones, smartphones, social media. Our oldest Gen Zer here, the old one here, Harlee, was born in 1997, so she's an old Gen Zer at the ripe old age of 26. And but she was, I think, 10 years old when the iPhone came out. So she doesn't really remember a time without smartphones either. So they're digital natives. Number two, Gen Zers are known as entrepreneurs. 72% of Gen Zers say they want to start their own business. That's pretty good. They're the most diverse generation. 50% of Gen Zers are minority, and 1 in 4 Gen Zers mark Hispanic if they give ethnicity. They are what's called the blurred generation because they have access to everything at their fingertips. Culture is blurred, styles are blurred. There are no two Gen Zers who dress the same. Style of dress is different. They're very eclectic. Some like the 80s. You've got Gen Zers who like K-pop, Gen Zers who like rap, Gen Zers who like country music. They are spread all across the spectrum. Interestingly, Gen Zers, 68% of Gen Zers say that they are overwhelmed by society. A large percentage of Gen Zers, and we'll let them speak to this today, say that they are lonely. Gen Zers struggle with depression and anxiety at rates that have not been seen since the Great Depression. They are individualistic. They're used to having everything personalized. They're way more individualistic than millennials. Millennials were the generation that, if you remember when we talked about them, millennials like to work together. Gen Zers are more individualistic. Like millennials, they love to travel. They are savers, and if you ever, in my generation, went to the arcade to play games, we saw it as games. A lot of Gen Zers see gaming as more than a hobby, and there are a lot of Gen Zers who've turned it into a money-making enterprise. So, all right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to these guys, and I'm just going to ask them, guys and gals, guy and gals, I guess I should say, and I'm going to ask them some questions and let them kind of run the discussion. Interestingly enough, we always talk about like what have Gen Zers been through, or what has each generation been through, and there's always kind of one big thing that kind of identifies each generation. And I would say probably, at least so far, it would be
COVID,
the pandemic. That affected you guys. The youngest of you guys were freshmen in high school, right?
I was an 8th grader.
8th grader.
7th grade. I was in 7th
Eighth grade?
8th grade.
So I was
Okay,
in
8th grade.
7th grade. Yeah.
Okay,
I was
7th
a
grade and 8th grade.
Junior or sophomore in college.
Okay, sophomore, junior in college. All right, so let's get to our questions. So tell me what you think, and you can, by the way, anything I've said you can agree or disagree with, because these are all general statements. No two people are alike, and not everybody in the Gen Z generation is exactly alike. So there may be some things I said today that you say, no, that's not really me, that's not really us. So number one, what do you see as the greatest strength or strengths of your generation?
I think our independence. Like, we're almost, we rely on others because we are a very community-based, generation. But, we are also, like you said, like, we're entrepreneurs and we want to start new businesses and start new things. And, we're also influencers, and we all have, like, our own podcast, or we all have our own books that we've written. And I think, like, independence is a really big thing for us.
I think the independence is, like, everyone wants to be the best they can be for the good of the whole. So they're really individualistic for just self-improvement, but a lot of Gen Zers kind of use that self-improvement to contribute to the group.
Mm-hmm. I think we're not scared to, like, speak up about what's wrong. We're not scared to go out and change it.
I mean, I guess I agree with those things. They kind of said everything. But
We'll let you go first next time. So interestingly enough, I'm glad you said what Hannah said about wanting to be the best, because one of the things that is a difference, generally speaking, between millennials and Gen Zers is millennials were the generation that, one of the negatives that people say about millennials all the time is they were the everybody got a trophy generation. What they say, what is the general thing about Gen Zers is they are extremely competitive and want to be better than everybody else, but also willing to work together. So interesting. All right, what do you think are some of the greatest weaknesses of your generation? Start with Sydnee, and then we'll go to Christian.
Okay. I think not social media, but the way some people act on social media and the way they're influenced by it, like, so easily. Like, they change their opinions after they've seen one post. Yeah, basically.
yeah, like, especially with extreme, like, viewpoints, they're more broadcasted on social media, and, like, it divides us easier, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Christian, because that's one of the things we see today, right, is on both sides of this political spectrum. You have extremes on both sides, and what happens is you guys are living in a time that is very polarized, politically speaking, and so that tends to make a lot of Gen Zers want to disconnect from the process. I know that I read an article that said Gen Zers are registering to vote less than the previous generations, and it's because they are kind of put out by everything that they're seeing on social media.
You can vote this year.
I can vote this year. I think a lot of it is, a lot of people don't think their vote will matter.
Yeah.
Because, well, for example, right now, there's two that have a very strong fan base, and a lot of Gen Z don't really tend to the extreme of either side. So they think being more moderate, they can't override the really strong bases for either side. So they think it won't matter as much.
Yeah. Absolutely. Something else that I think, like Christian said, like, one of our weaknesses is that, like, we're very prone, sorry ladies, to our phones. We're very prone to our phones. We're very prone to having, like, that be our screen. And when it becomes our screen, when we go out into public, a lot of us don't know how to have a conversation with somebody. And a lot of it is texting, and a lot of it is social media. And it's a lot of just, like, that screen of us being there and not being completely, you know, being able to sit down and have a conversation one-on-one with somebody.
Interesting, talking about your screen. How many movies have you guys been to in the last year? Like at the movie theater?
This year?
Oh gosh. I'm gonna
We
look at
watched
Chris.
Like in
One.
2024 or since of last?
Just say within the last year,
Within
in the
the
last 12 months.
Like 10 or
So you've been a little bit more.
went to Barbie.
All go together.
Yeah,
So
they-
it's about
they-
the same.
I would say I've been the less though.
I feel like I've been, because
I've been to like 6.
I'll say
I
8.
think.
I think
I feel
8.
like I've been to like maybe 4 or 5.
Middle ground. I'll say 6.
I mean, now that it's all streaming, you just wait till it comes out
Yeah,
on
well,
streaming.
and that's kind of
Yeah.
the thing is that the Gen Z generation is largely checked out of the movie theater because you can stream it.
It also costs a lot more.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does.
And you're savers. You don't
Yeah.
like to spend a lot of money. Unless it's your parents' money, and then you don't mind. You can spend your parents' money. For the most, sometimes. All right.
Do I?
No, not really. Okay, so kind of going, we talked about the strengths and weaknesses. What do you think other generations misunderstand about you?
That we're lazy.
Okay, that's the big thing,
That's
right?
the big thing because, you know, we lived through a time where the entire world shut down. And we've had multiple things stacked against us in the fact of, like, you know, when it comes to us being lazy, like Hannah said earlier, she said that our generation isn't the person that's like, oh, what did you say? It was on something overtime. It was like, you didn't get paid for
If you
overtime.
didn't get paid,
yeah.
yeah.
They won't work overtime unless they're being compensated for it.
Yeah.
A lot would work because they want what's good for the company.
Yeah.
But Gen Zs don't really care for the company.
Oh man, did you read that article that I read today? I mean, you just quoted the article that I read today,
I
and
have
that
read
is
some articles, probably not that one. I
it's
didn't read it
interesting
today.
because it's talking about how some generations have been you're more loyal to the company than you are to your paycheck, and Gen Zers have largely said, I am way more loyal to my paycheck than I am to the company, and so if you are not going to compensate me, then I'm not gonna do the work.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think there's good and bad in both viewpoints, right? Because the bad in the other viewpoint is that you can work and sacrifice your family, and you're not actually helping your family because you're still working. You're helping the company. The other viewpoint is sometimes we have to be willing to sacrifice. So there's a good middle point. But that's a great point that you made. What else? What do you think that other generations misunderstand about you?
I think a lot of older generations think Gen Z's really easily offended.
yeah.
And I can see where you would think that, but I think a lot of it is Gen Z is really confrontational. So if you say something, they'll respond. But, like, in my opinion, I don't think many people actually take it to heart, but they're willing to argue with you over it.
So do you think they'll respond more on social media? Like more willing to respond on social media?
Yes.
And that's where
This-
probably you
Where
see
people
that.
think. And it's not everyone. It's just people who are chronically online.
Yeah. I think with that, they also think that we're disrespectful, but we're just trying to state our opinions in the right way.
Yeah.
But they don't see that, so they think, oh, well, because you're disagreeing with me, you're being disrespectful.
Okay. Do you think there's a loud minority
Yes.
that sometimes speaks for you and doesn't really speak your viewpoint, but
Absolutely.
you get people assume that's your viewpoint because there's a minority that's speaking loudly?
See, so when I was growing up, you know, I was told to sit down, be seen, not heard. So me, when I'm in a confrontational situation, I just back up and I'm like, okay. And I guess that's like almost like where I lean more towards the millennial side of things. But like with you guys, like when I watch you guys like have a conversation with somebody, like y'all's generation, it's amazing because like you are seen and you are heard and you want to be heard no matter, you know, what comes your way. And, you know, going back to what Sydnee said about like being disrespectful. And I definitely also see that, like, especially in the news and all of that about, you know, people are getting offended that aren't even don't even know what's going on. So
Do you think it's harder for your generation at times to listen because you don't think that you're being heard?
It depends. like, I think we're willing to hear people out, but if it's listening as an obedience, I don't think they're as willing to be obedient if they don't feel heard.
Yeah. Were you gonna say
Yeah,
something?
Christian, do you want to say something?
Wait, what was the question?
What do other generations misunderstand about you?
Like, I mean, like with the vocal minority, I think like definitely with social media, like a lot of the big like headlines of like what Gen Z says and does is like put out there, and then a lot of older people take that as, oh, this is what everybody thinks. And I mean, that happens all the time with other kinds of people, like I guess races and whatever. But I think it like carries over to this because like whenever people see what these small amount of people are saying, and then they're like, oh, everybody hates this or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they assume things about you that aren't true.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. What have you learned from people in your life who are from other generations?
How to drive a stick shift. Sorry.
Not a thing.
How to drive a stick shift.
I mean, what's one thing you could say, wow, that's a perspective? Like maybe in the podcast that you listened to that we've done so far with the other generations, what's something maybe somebody said there that you thought, oh, I can identify with that? I mean, I was kind of thinking like you guys are talking about not being heard. That was one of the things that the baby boomer generation was so loud about, is they felt like they weren't being heard. So they were kind of the rebel generation out there, speaking up.
That fits. I'm trying to think of something specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll move on to another question. If something comes to you and you think about it, and we'll come back to it. So let's talk about social media, because we talked about this a little bit before we started the podcast, and that social media is definitely an identifying factor for Gen Zers, because you grew up with social media. I mean, so Facebook came out before you guys were born. And I know Facebook is old people social media. What I read, and you guys can tell me whether you agree, is that the three primary social media platforms for Gen Zers are TikTok, Instagram, and
Snapchat?
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't Snapchat.
X?
Nope.
Oh.
I don't know what else.
Twitch?
TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Oh,
I
I
was
don't
say
use
Twitch. I
YouTube.
don't use YouTube.
Yeah.
Attention spam.
Yeah,
So-
I can't use YouTube.
Tell me what role social media plays in your life. And tell us how high your streaks are, and explain what streaks are for
Okay.
people who
Oh,
don't
so
have no
start
idea
with
what it
Someone
is.
explain what streaks are.
On Snapchat, if you send a photo every day, it has a streak. So me and Hannah, we have a 1,565 day streak. That's like 4 years, 3
4
years.
years?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's a way we make sure we're talking every day
Mm-hmm.
or connecting every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Even
not a
if
bad
it's
thing.
just a picture
Yeah.
of a wall.
Yeah. But about the role of social media, I feel like I have it and I use it, but it doesn't define anything about me. Like I use it for art. I like to put my art out, and I like to see other people's art, and I keep up with friends.
Mm-hmm. That's a big thing. Keeping up with friends.
Yeah.
Because, like, the friends I don't talk to, like, every day and I don't have their phone numbers, I think Instagram and Snapchat are a good way to stay in contact with them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Especially, like, over the long breaks and stuff.
Right.
Because they're not people I'm going to talk to every day.
Also, I feel like a lot of people, if they're having a more casual conversation, will use Snapchat or Instagram.
Yeah.
They don't text unless it's like if I'm inviting someone to something, I'll send them a text.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're just having a conversation, I probably don't text as much.
For me, what I use like social media for is mostly just like when I'm bored, which probably isn't a good thing because I get bored a lot. But I mean, I do keep up with people some, but not It's more just like I see a funny video and I send it to
It's like a way to pass time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you get caught up in Facebook it's Reels, on YouTube it's Shorts? Is that something that you get caught up in a lot?
Yeah, TikTok.
Instagram Reels.
Yeah.
I do
TikTok is
TikTok. I just
TikTok.
scroll
Yep.
and scroll.
Yeah. So would you say, so statistically, tell me whether you agree with this or not. This is one of the things that I've researched is that Gen Zers largely say that their viewpoints are largely influenced by the people that they follow on social media. So they're forming how they view the world based on who they are watching and seeing on social media.
I mean, it's kind of like a yes and a no.
Yeah, I feel like certain opinions, but not how
Yeah.
you feel the whole world and stuff.
Yeah.
It shapes it.
Yeah.
Another like kind of misunderstanding too, I think, about social media. A lot of people think Gen Zers don't don't watch the news, but every major news channel also has social media.
Yeah.
They all
So
have
it's
it.
a little bit like a condensed
Version
version
it.
of the
Yeah.
news. Just and you can see it faster.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that
Mm-hmm.
explains it, but
Yeah.
I don't use social media for news at all, so
Well,
That's how I find things out.
Well, the funny thing is like, especially on like TikTok, for example, like if you watch one video, now your entire feed is like
Yeah.
all of the same
Yeah.
videos.
Yeah, exactly.
So like if you watch one thing about a newscast that was on talking about a panda bear, now all you're getting is newscasts, and it's amazing to see like, you know, how we've gone from an hour, 30 minutes, an hour long segment on a TV channel to now to a 10-second video about, you know, panda bears.
Now it's all the Met Gala right now.
Yeah, it's on the Met Gala
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. So do you think there's some danger in that though? And I'm just thinking out loud, so you can agree or disagree with this. Do you think there's some danger in that, in the fact that most social media algorithms are designed not to give you varying viewpoints of things, but to reinforce the viewpoint that you have, because that's what's going to drive, or to reinforce what if you watched a video that's, say, not a viewpoint that you have, but then every other thing that's going to show up for a while is going to be that viewpoint, and it can skew you away from trying to see what might be both sides of that. Do you think there's some danger in that?
Yeah. Because, like, specifically, like, for me, is like, I'm a really big women's national team soccer fan. I love the women's national team. But a lot of them, their viewpoints are very skewed from my viewpoints. And I have caught myself a couple of times being like, oh, yeah, I agree with that. And then I have to sit and I have to think about it. I'm like, do I actually agree with this? Or am I just saying I agree with it to make myself feel better? And I have had to sit and actually contemplate a few things after watching that, because that's all that comes up on my social media pages sometimes.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I guess for me, I find it kind of like annoying that it does it, because I'm like, usually with those kind of issues that are very like, what's the word, like polarizing. I don't really want to be like involved with all of those ideas, or like usually it's really negative, so I'm like, I just want to be left out of it.
Yeah.
So I just don't like when it keeps getting like recommended to me.
Absolutely.
Because like social media right now, it's full of a lot of negative stuff, and like once you see one negative post, it's gonna keep going negative and negative, and it like makes your day worse.
that's like both of them said. This is less political, but you mentioned mental health, and I think how algorithms show you the same thing, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of negative,
It's
kind of
like
makes it
depressing.
worse.
Yeah.
Like if you see something really sad, but you saw it, so you interacted with it online, you're just gonna keep getting more sad videos.
Yeah.
And it's not. I don't feel like it's a good thing for your mental health to see that all the time.
Well, also, like, going off what you said, Hannah, like, if you're having a conversation, like, not even on your phone, and you're just having a conversation with somebody, somehow your phone picks up on that.
Yeah, exactly, and it pops up on the next day.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So if we're talking about mental health, I bet y'all
it's
that
gonna pop up. It's gonna pop up. A depressive video is gonna pop up on my feed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Out of all the generations podcasts we've done so far, you guys are the first group that has actually trended to being more willing to talking about political things, which is interesting because it's typically the older generations who are the most political in conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it's good. I think it's good that you guys are willing to engage in those things. You know, what I would encourage you to do is to seek the truth. You know, God, what is the truth in all these things? And that kind of segues me into the next couple of things I want to talk about, and it's the role of faith, because, you know, one of the things that certainly defines the Gen Z generation is they are I don't like the word religion because there's a negative connotation to it, but I'm just going to use that term. The Gen Z generation is the least religious generation. 29% of college freshmen, when asked their religious affiliation, say none, of the Gen Z generation, which is the highest number ever. And so you guys, I think maybe all of you guys, probably grew up in some kind of a church, or hopefully not just a church context. Like in our, Hannah, you can say if I'm lying or not, but in our house we try not to make it, it's not just about church, because church is not our relationship with God. Jesus is our relationship with God. And the church that we're part of is an outpouring of that relationship we have with God. But let's talk a little bit about faith. How does your personal faith define you? You know, I'm not talking about like where you doubt, because we all doubt. We all have things that we're struggling through. But just on a day-to-day basis, navigating life, how would you say your faith plays a role in how you navigate your daily?
Prerogative? Okay. Well, for me, especially so I did grow up in a church. I grew up going to church. I knew a little bit about God, but not a whole bunch about God. But at my house, God really wasn't present. So growing up, I really didn't have that faith basis until I met Chris. And when Chris brought me here, it was like a godsend. But, for me, it's a lot of, I don't know much about the Bible. So it's a lot of me I have a problem. Okay, let me go see what the Bible says about it, because I need to know. Mm-hmm. And, I'm also really big on studying other religions, not saying that I'm another religion, but seeing, why they worship the way that they do. And so actually witnessing, I've gone out of the country and I've gone and I've seen these people witness and worship the Lord. And it's amazing to watch them worship a God that's not even there. And when I come home, it kind of wrecks me a little bit, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, I don't worship my God the same way they worship theirs. Why? So I feel like it's a lot of me kind of discovering, what my faith is and why I believe what I believe. What is my why? And a lot of it has to do with, not growing up in a Christian home and not growing up a way a lot of my other friends have. And I mean, my husband grew up in a Christian home and I didn't. And it's amazing to watch, especially you guys, getting to hang out with you guys and watch you guys love the Lord. It's amazing because I get to witness you guys love the Lord so much and let him lead your life in a way that I wish I could when I was your age, I wish I would have let him lead my life the way he leads y'all's. So a lot for me is discovering, what God says and what the word says. And that's kind of how I lead my life through faith. Mm-hmm. So
I think discovering the why, because I grew up in a Christian home and I went to a private school for all of elementary, and it was God and God. So I feel it's am I doing this because I want to? So it's discovering my why. But yeah.
Same thing. I feel like sometimes when you grow up in a Christian home,
yeah, and
all of your education is Christian, you wonder, do I really believe, or do I believe because this is how I was raised to act?
And because everybody around me is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think being raised Christian has informed how I act towards other people,
mm-hmm.
And how I go through my life. I think because I know so much about the Bible, I'm more aware when there's a lot of misconceptions about what the Bible says or what Christianity is. So sometimes it's kind of disheartening to see those misconceptions, knowing what I do and how little I can actually affect how everyone sees it. So I try my best to be an example, be a good person. So when someone sees me and they're like, oh, that's what it actually is and not what these misconceptions are.
Do you find it difficult to speak out?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think it kind of all goes back to like us wanting to be heard, but not 100% sure what we want to be heard about. Like there are certain situations where like, yeah, I can give you my point of view on that. Like let's talk about it. And then there's other things you're like,
You're not so sure.
maybe not.
Because, like, I can argue with the best of them. If someone asks me a question, I can tell you exactly what the answer is, and I can tell you where I got that from. And I can give all the best answers. But if someone asks my, like, the emotional aspect of it, how I feel
Yeah.
about something, I find it more difficult to share that.
Especially if you don't know.
Yeah.
Like I don't like looking at someone and be like, oh, I don't know. Like we don't want to say that to somebody. Like we want to know. Like we want to know what we're talking about. And when you're like, I don't know, let me ask. We're like, maybe I don't want to do this.
What about you, Christian?
I guess like back to the original question, like I mean I try to like act better or whatever, but I'm not like the most like well informed on the Bible, but I definitely am trying, but yeah, I guess I'm just trying to learn more about it, but it's yeah.
So do you think having each other helps in your walk?
Yeah.
Kind of keep each other accountable, to help answer each other's questions, to help, navigate life together?
I think, who was it that mentioned the emotional aspect? Hannah. I think it's definitely good to hear what each one of us has to say about something, like what we think, just because, I don't know, it's just better to know either that someone agrees with the way you feel about something, or that, you can understand what they're saying about that, I guess.
It's nice to have them to fall back on when most of my day it is conflicting. So, like, I know that they will be there to talk about stuff, and I can be truthful there.
And like they get it.
Yeah.
With a lot of people that aren't, like, I guess, Christians, it's hard to, like, I guess, explain your viewpoint, because a lot of people are so, like extreme with, like, they're like, oh,
Against it.
yeah, they're against it. Yeah.
They have a preconceived idea of what you're going to say. Yeah. Good. All right, one more question, and then we'll just kind of, anything else you guys want to share. What would you say influences you the most? People, social media,
Probably my friends.
your friends?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's like, for me, because I'm on that edge of like, millennial, it's the generations before me that kind of influence me, because I'm like, would my mom enjoy me doing this? Probably not. Would my grandfather enjoy me doing this? Probably not. And like, so that kind of like influences me to like be a better person. So
I think I agree with Harlee. I usually ask my mom if I should do
it's
this
okay,
or that.
Christian. I'm 26 years old and I still ask my mom if I can do something.
For me, okay, you and these two a lot, and you, Harlee. But I don't have as many conversations with you that would influence me. But I like to have informed conversations, I would like to say. So when I'm talking with someone, it kind of forces me to actually think about how I feel about something or forces me to do some more research. So, especially with you, I feel like you influence how I think in either direction. If I'm agreeing with you or if I'm disagreeing with you, the conversations shape where that goes.
Yeah, and you've made me think, and you've changed my mind on some things, even when I don't like to admit it.
I think
All
I
right.
also, like, if I had to pick, like, one specific person, sorry, Chris, but I would have to say Howie, because he is, like, so informed about a lot of things, and that I didn't know he would be informed about. Like, we could start a conversation talking about, like, baseball, and then turn around and be like, oh, and today at church we talked about this. Like, can you explain this to me? And it's, like, a whole nother conversation, and it's just great getting to talk to him sometimes and, like, sit down and pick his brain, and, yeah.
All right, so let me close with this kind of last thing and anything else that you guys want to say. So one of the things that, as we've been walking through this generation study, I've referenced a man named James Chung, who is a Christian who has done a lot of research on the generations, and one of the things that he talks about often is each generation can be defined by the primary question that they're asking. And there are two researchers who aren't, I don't know if they're Christians, but they might be, but they may not, I'm not sure. But they did a study back in the 80s and 90s where they identified the different generations. And so the baby boomers were the prophet generation, the Gen Xers were the nomad generation, the millennials are the hero generation, and they defined Gen Zers, which they called the homeland generation, is how they defined it. But they define your generation as the artist generation. Well, James Chung took that idea and he talked about questions that people ask. So baby boomers were asking, what is truth? They wanted to know the truth. Gen Xers were asking, what is real? They didn't just want the truth, they wanted to see examples of the truth lived out. Millennials were asking, what is good? Like, what can I do that is good that will impact the world? And what James Chung said is that Gen Zers are asking, what is beautiful? What is worth giving my life for? What is worthy of my worship? So thinking about that, would you say that you agree with that question? That you agree with that synopsis that you're kind of the artist generation where you're an amalgam of all the generations before, but also you're asking that question, what is worth giving my worship to? And what is worthy and beautiful in this world?
Yeah. I don't want to waste my life away on something that's not worth it.
Yeah. I agree with you, Sydnee. But no, you said it perfectly.
Because we only live once.
I mean, YOLO.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Anything else that you guys want to add? Something that you want people to know? Something you'd like to say? You know, you guys said that COVID is a defining thing in your generation, but there are two other big things that you guys have been through in your young lives, and it is the Me Too movement. Me Too ramped up kind of as you guys were coming of age, and now there's kind of a little bit of kind of a rubber band effect of coming back, where there's some who realize the Me Too movement went too far, and now there's a little bit of a movement back of we shouldn't automatically assume somebody's guilty. And so there's this kind of little bit of thing that's going on right now. But then, of course, the George Floyd thing is not a good way to put it. The murder of George Floyd was a hugely impactful thing. Obviously, it affected the trajectory of our nation. It's affected a lot of the laws that have been passed since then. So certainly you guys have had a lot of major societal things that have happened just in the 15, 20 years of your generation. 25 years if you're talking from the beginning of it till now.
I think we have more awareness of issues like societally and globally. Like, there's a big focus in our generation of like the victim and making things right for people. So there's a bigger push towards, so for me too, a push for women in the workforce. And then for George Floyd and everything that resulted from that, there's a bigger push towards understanding how people are treated in the workforce, in schools, in society in general. And along with COVID and just the news and more broadcast, Gen Z is really aware of global conflict and inequities in other countries. And social media has kind of shrunk the world a little bit. So like 50 years ago, you see the news and it's what's happening in your country. And then now I could look right now and I could find out what's happening across the world. And I can see what's happening in the country next to that. So you can know a little bit about everything that's happening around you. And all of that kind of reflects back on how we think we should treat others. I don't know if that...
Yeah.
And I guess we can see all of those things, but we don't have to necessarily like agree with all of them, but we can still take in like what the values that they're trying to show through the different things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, if there's one big take that I can learn from your generation, it's that my generation tends to be, this is the way it is, and get over it. And what I'm learning, what you guys are teaching me is I can be in stark disagreement, that I need to be, and it's a biblical thing, that is okay to be in stark disagreement with someone and still love them, because Jesus commands us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And that means whether we agree with them or disagree with them politically. And that's something that the world definitely needs to learn today, because what we're certainly hearing on social media and the news is hate everybody that disagrees with you. And we need to learn to love people that we disagree with, and learn to communicate and discuss things. And yes, vote our opinions and vote what we think is right and true, but love people where they are. All right. Well, thank you guys. Great discussion. It's probably our longest podcast so far. But you guys did a great job. I really appreciate you coming on today. And we might see some of you again, because we may try to do some cross-generational stuff in the weeks ahead. We'll kind of see how that goes. I'm not promising that, but that's what we may try to do. But thanks for joining us again. Thanks for being with us. And looking forward to what God is going to do in your lives. 2 of you are graduating from high school here in just a couple of weeks. One next year. One is in the EMC course of study. Are you doing local preacher?
Yeah.
Are you doing the local preacher thing? So awesome stuff. I love that you can live out your call from God, and that God is calling both men and women to do great things for Him. All right. Well, thanks again. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.